I am sick of trying to read stuff on the internet about ADHD when seemingly over 70% of the content talks about your child or children with ADHD. I am a 24-year-old male from UK who got diagnosed last year. Sometimes I find myself procrastinating and start to research ADHD stuff when I become aware that I am procrastinating. I am sick of reading yet another article or whatever, presumably by someone who doesn't have ADHD, starting sentences with, if your child, or it's best to speak to your child, or homework this, homework that. It makes me feel patronized, invisible, and ridiculed all at the same time. If these people are so knowledgeable about ADHD, which they claim to be, then why don't they include the word adult and stop pretending we don't exist? There's this weird feeling I get where every time I see ADHD being mentioned in the context of children, I feel ignored, and more importantly, as if I'm just a big baby who can't get their crap together and has to be compared to school children. I know this is something that everyone is aware of, the fact that there is a big misconception about adult ADHD, but it still makes me mad every time. On a side note, I also don't like hearing professionals' opinion about ADHD when they don't have it themselves. It feels like we're their lab mice and they have dedicated their life to studying something they will never truly understand. I know they know more than me, and this is my sensitive and overly emotional side speaking, but I can't help but feel like they don't really know what it's like. This is why I would always prefer to be treated by someone who has it. Rant over. Haha. This might be a part of why I didn't take diagnosis seriously for so long. I struggled for years and have lost jobs to it, but just thought it was my fault and not the ADHD. Because every time I tried to understand it, all I heard was that it affects kids and goes away for adults. And with every other article being about kids, I really believed that. But it doesn't go away, it's only gotten worse, so clearly that was a lie, of which I am very aware now but could not know then. Exactly, my friend. Turns out I was diagnosed as a kid, was in Turkey, and I'm half Turkish, but clearly my parents just ignored the diagnosis, and perhaps the awareness wasn't great in Turkey at the time. I feel you. Constantly being angry at myself for not being normal, and then on top of that, hearing that it's just for kids, makes me feel even less of an adult. My parents were extremely neglectful, so I understand that can hurt. I wasn't diagnosed as a kid, but they likely would have ignored that too. I'm sorry you didn't get the help you needed either. We both deserved better. This is why I'm glad I've started seeking out other people with ADHD on the internet and found this sub. I knew ADHD affected me badly, but now I'm understanding that it really is a disability and that it affects every aspect of my life. All the things I blamed myself for, was unable to change, have answers now. I wouldn't know that from all those ridiculous articles written by neurotypicals about kids. We need more articles about ADHD by people who live with it. My parents also gave up on me very early. They just said I'm lazy and need to try more, even in my early 30s. Me, a woman in her 30s. I'd like to make an appointment for ADHD, please. Is this for your child? Just about anything I do in relation to this, I'm asked if this is for my child. No, sorry, I didn't get a new brain for my 18th birthday. I don't even have any children because I can't keep a houseplant alive. No, it's for me, because ADHD is a lifelong thing like autism, not something you just grow out of, and I'd like to be able to keep my job and not be a disorganized mess. The problem is that some people can not grow out of, but adapt to their ADHD as they grow up. My sister's partner is primarily hyperactive and has been scathing at times about me blaming my primary inattentive ADHD for my difficulties in finding a job that's a good fit. As a child, I tended to be quiet, well-behaved, and hyper-focused on things that interested me: science fiction books, technical manuals, math, science, computer stuff. So I got good grades and stayed out of trouble mostly. My little brother was hyperactive though and diagnosed ADHD young. I wasn't diagnosed ADHD until I was almost 30, and only because I had to get evaluated and get a diagnosis before the state agency would assist me, because I could barely adult anymore, had trouble focusing, keeping a job, etc. My brother really seems to have mellowed out a lot as an adult, and now I'm hyperactive. Go figure. Crap. This is or was me to a T. except my brothers were older, and after watching them break every rule they made and skip school or get arrested, parties busted, my parents decided that when I got to high school, they were going to get ahead of it and nip it in the bud. Except I literally never snuck out, only stayed up late by my introverted self, either reading or painting, kept high grades. The only trouble I got in was with authority figures, teachers, who didn't like when I wasn't obedient, quiet when given rules or punishments that I knew weren't fair and came from a place of ego and insecurity. Perhaps an expression of my frustration with being cracked down on because of what my parents assumed I was going to do and never did. Boy, am I a mess now. LOL. My brothers mellowed out too, while I'm just all over the place and can't stop crying at everything. ADHD, much like other developmental disorders, autism spectrum disorder, was first discovered by studying the development of children. The study of ADHD as a disorder was not about the difficulty it causes the individual, but the difficulty it causes that individual's parents, or more aptly, I think, the study of it as a naughty child disorder. This concept is inextricably linked to the modern, wider understanding of the disorder, which, all things considered, has been expanding quite rapidly. The issue is that kids with altered development still develop. Yes, my brain has never had control of that magical focus juice, epinephrine, but has gotten pretty dang good at making do in these past 25 years. So no, as an adult, I'm certainly not getting up and leaving my seat to wander about idly in the middle of my meeting, nor am I having uncontrolled outbursts of emotion and action. But I am still bored to tears, literally, when I'm forced to fill out any amount of paperwork unmedicated. I still lose everything. I still have an inability to organize. Oh yeah, and this cookie tastes so good. Let's eat 12. I also have other things that come from being undiagnosed, unmedicated, and ignorant of my disorder for 97% of my life that I did not have as a child, such as a crippling fear of rejection due to all the times my impulsiveness, my forgetfulness, and my disorganization have led to, well, rejection when I was trying as hard as I possibly could to please. I have an inability to plan ahead, to set goals, to maintain interest in one pursuit for any worthwhile period of time. I have the debt that I've racked up in nonsensical, impulsive purchasing. I have the dusty, ill-kept vault where savings might have been that I've meant to somehow turn into money. I have dysregulated emotions that wash me away like the tide at the beach, floating to the horizon in exhaustion after. Turns out a developmental disorder doesn't present the same constellation of symptoms as its child form. It's basic psychosocial and sociology. So yes, I very much feel your frustration. This type of misunderstanding keeps so many people from the type of help they need. I know it kept me away for a long time. Oh yeah, and this cookie tastes so good, let's eat 12. I know this wasn't the main point of what you were saying, but I have been like this my entire life. I'm not even overweight, but I was always made fun of for eating things like this or not eating certain things because of my sensitivity to textures. This is a huge deal for some people with ADHD that I wish would be looked into more. I literally cannot stomach most vegetables just because of the way they feel in my mouth. Additionally, I binge on sweet and unhealthy foods because my brain says that I'll regret it if I don't do it now. That's caused health problems on its own, and combined with not brushing my teeth because of executive dysfunction, I just hope and pray that I don't end up with dentures. I was reading an article about ADHD that said some symptoms may still be present in adolescence and adulthood. I just absolutely hate that this implies that only kids suffer from this. Yeah, an adult may get past their irrational fear of certain textures for their own health, but that isn't because they no longer have that fear. I wish they would actually study people with ADHD instead of their parents or teachers. Here with ya. I'm someone who prefers to be low carb because of other medical issues. Guess what my ADHD brain wants 24/7? Carbs. Guess what food texture I have problems with? Meat. My entire life with food is a freaking battle. I also have food texture problems with meat. It's gotten more severe as I've gotten older, or maybe that's because I've been experimenting with alternatives. I'm not as interested in forcing myself to suffer through meat texture. I'll probably never be fully vegetarian since there are still some things that I enjoy, but I've definitely been shifting towards it because of this. I was vegetarian or vegan for almost a decade, and my doctors think it's a direct cause of my current issues. I'm slowly figuring out meat I can tolerate. I like ground beef based things like tacos. Hamburgers are iffy. I do love chicken and bacon, but I absolutely cannot eat steak. And things like pork or pork loin need to be cooked very specifically or I won't eat them. Haha, yep. I'm currently in the process of trying to educate my partner about what ADHD is. We've been dating for over 2 years. He still hadn't even Googled it until I confronted him about it about 2 months ago. Smiley face. But all I can find online are articles about, so you think your partner might have ADHD? Are they constantly putting off chores, unable to meet deadlines or follow up on commitments, can't keep track of their obligations or appointments? Do you have to treat them like a child? If so, they might just have ADHD. You should encourage them to seek professional help and work with them to feel like equal partners again. Like, sorry, bro, I'm stuck in the parent role of this relationship. I'm the one doing the research. I'm the one that's been receiving professional help for years, and I'm the one with ADHD. Not all adults with ADHD act like children. So if someone could just write a decent freaking article about explaining ADHD for adult partner of an adult ADHDer without making a lot of baseless assumptions, that would be great. You don't have to be a neurotypical to freaking perceive relationships or ADHD. Jesus freaking Christ. I agree with you. My partner has ADHD, and when we started living together, I started researching more about it. A lot of the articles are either about kids or about adults that are lazy or childish. Threw me off so much because he's not my kid. I found the YouTube channel How to ADHD and I find it super useful. Also, I have BPD, and a lot of the articles out there are about how people with BPD are toxic or likely to cheat. LOL, it's so frustrating. Ugh, the relationship stuff is some of the worst. Not just for ADHD either, but usually it's a little how to tell if your partner has X, and romantic partners with X are literally Satan or the best human ever, and it's super frustrating when you want actual information. I very much relate. It's exhausting. When I'm looking for stuff just through a generic web research like Google, I try to remember that I'm not searching the whole world of information. I am kind of yelling into a shopping mall, and all these people are hearing me and coming running at me. They're almost all selling me something, not trying to educate me, so they're gonna give me the sales pitch that works on what they perceive as their biggest audience. And I think that is parents who are worried about their kids and have money to throw at the problem. So that's what Google tells me. What would be great is if I could yell into a library and the best I can get is searching through medical journals or specific psych areas of the web. The professional who diagnosed me was a woman with ADHD herself. I've never felt more understood and validated. I completely understand where you're coming from and it sucks. I think I had the best of both worlds when I finally got around to my diagnosis. At 25, should have done it a decade or more earlier, but my grades throughout school were always exceptional even if my behavior and effort were the opposite. I'm from New Zealand, so I guess the process varies, but I had to go through my usual GP doctor and ask about going through the process. Turns out he has ADHD and really gets it, so he referred me to a psychiatrist who specializes in adult men's health, specifically ADHD among other things. Even more lucky, it would normally be $500 for the consultation and then $250 for each follow-up, but I actually have health insurance, not very common here. Hospitals and prescriptions are free anyways, so I didn't pay a dang cent other than $5 for my monthly prescription. Months of only seeing the articles mentioned by the original poster, and all the stigma has gotten me doubting myself. Feeling condescended to and insulted all suddenly flipped around to being understood and given respect, and I count myself beyond lucky that I happened to stumble across just the right people. I cackled, but was also pretty annoyed when I bought my first book about coping with ADHD, and it showed up with a giant photo of a 12-year-old boy going wild on a tire swing. LMAO. I'm a 30-year-old female contract manager with ADHD, primary and attentive. I hoped the insides of the book would be more nuanced, but it was all about how to get your hyper kid to do homework and not become a wild, rebellious teen. Ended up getting other books that were super helpful and written for adults. Driven to Distraction is one of my faves, but that one was just hilarious and annoying to me. Also got a book that claimed medication wasn't necessary and took people's sparkle away. Very much a ADHD is a superpower vibe too, in an obnoxious way. Threw that in the trash immediately. I've literally never been so sparkly in my life since starting medication. This happens a lot with autism too, to be honest. P.S. I'm not invalidating your struggles. I have ADD and autism. God, this was so frustrating for me back when I worked in a loosely ABA adjacent program. I was trying my darnest to find websites and articles by and for autistic adults, especially those who were described as quote-unquote lower functioning, barf, as kids. And every freaking thing was for parents. Like, frick off. I'm not interested in the 10,000th article crying about the horrors of having an autistic child, you ableist walnut. Give me the real thing. They thought it went away as adults because, number one, they can potentially structure their life so the ADHD isn't a quote-unquote problem until it is. This takes a degree of social and financial privilege in the ability to do so, and even then, the support system developed can be overwhelmed, such as by having children, especially when they also have ADHD, and increasing responsibilities at work, and you are just expected to handle it on your own. I lament the fact that my ADHD is controlled enough that I can be a rare individual contributor at work. But to go any higher, I really need my own administrative assistant or personal assistant. But that isn't an option until executive levels or for someone to marry well enough that their spouse can support them and can afford to pay for helpers or personal assistants. Number 2, the obvious symptom of hyperactivity and distractibility are either turned inward or redirected to more quote-unquote appropriate outlets. This can look like picking career paths that allow for a lot of activity, or even running around the office like the copy machine, going to talk to someone in person, even if the question could have been a quick email. This feeds into why the risk of drug addiction appears to increase for those who have been on ADHD medications as children. Experts thought it was outgrown around puberty, so the patient was taken off medication. Patients still sought relief from their most debilitating symptoms, but official channels were not available, so they ended up turning to quote-unquote street pharmacists who don't have the patient's interest in mind, side effects, and ensuring everything is working properly and there is no quality control. Number 3, the obvious symptoms observable by others also happen to coincide with negative personality traits. So people just think you're an inconsiderate, lazy loser with no ambition and a big mouth, or you are just an inconsiderate, lazy, flighty space cadet or something like that. Resources I like: the How to ADHD channel on YouTube, ADHD Homestead blog, and other various blogs or Reddit or Tumblr posts. Various books about ADHD and setting up things so symptoms are not debilitating. I'll also read scientific papers about various aspects when I can get my hands on them.